A very warm welcome and thank you so much for tuning in to Galaxy TV, Tanzania, Namibia, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Sudan, Somalia, wherever you are watching. Thank you so much. Well, it is once again that day, the Sunday. This is Sankofa, where we look back at African history and analyze the present whilst we're trying to get a pic of how the future could look like for Africa. And I am your host, Petros. Well, here's the thing. Africa is opulent. Africa is not indigent at all. And these words are being uttered on a daily basis. Yet, livelihoods of African people do not reflect what is being said about their continent. Now, the question then pops up as to what exactly is the reality about the condition of Africa? Where did it all go wrong? And how could the current state of our continent be ameliorated? Of course, that is the subject on the table today. We're talking about rebooting the African software. And I am not alone, of course. I have my co-host here, Bishop Joshua Maponga III. Bishop, a very warm welcome to you. Good morning.
Greetings to you, sir. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here again after some
time,
a week of reflections. Thank you.
It's been a heavy week for you. Monday you're with us, Wednesday, Friday, and then today you're here.
What can we do? What can we do? A man must do what a man must do.
Yeah, but what do you have on the store today for us? Just in short, summary, quickly.
I brought my stick with me.
Yes.
And we're going to be visiting the ancient times.
Yes.
When our old people used to be walking around carrying these sticks. What information is written,
yeah,
and what can we decode in terms of us understanding where we are now by using the tools of the past. So today we're going to be doing something we call thinking tools. Thinking tools, and I'm going to take you through this. And at the end of the day, I hope that all of your listeners and all our listeners out there will at least make one thinking tool for themselves. For the first time, you'll understand what this represents.
Yeah, quite very interesting, because what I want us to do here at first is the thing to look at exactly, just to have a glimpse when we talk about the back ancient times. Firstly, if we could have it under the segment of politics. And if you look at politics, one of the things I want to look into, every time when we talk about politics, you have colonialization coming in every aspect, every view. There's some sort of thing to say. But now, what I want us to do is that, now, if you look at the history of colonialism in African, does it remain contentious politically today in the world?
We need to understand that politics has to do with governance and how one community wants to govern itself.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, now we're not discussing how a community wants to govern itself. We're dealing with how an external community wants to govern a local community. And now when you do that, you always find that the culture, the ideologies, the philosophies of the dominant culture, which is the colonial culture, seems to always abuse the local culture to such an extent that by the time the African is saying it's our independence and it's our country, it remains your country on words.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the practicality of implementing and working and being able to enjoy the benefits of your country, those benefits remain locked in the hands of the dominant culture. And in this case, we're addressing colonialism at its best. That colonization, it is the minority who are actually abusing the majority. And then through independence, the minority allows the few in the majority to become custodians of the political system, so that it becomes a window dressing where people are free that we're in a country, and we're only free because we can write a flag. That is our flag and the national anthem.
Yeah, yeah.
That independence does not talk to your money. It doesn't talk to your culture. It doesn't talk to your education. It doesn't talk to your agriculture. It doesn't talk to your mining. It doesn't talk to your basic respect as a nation. Therefore, independence and religion, I will say it again until they hear it, it remains entertainment for the poor.
Now, what do we say here, Bishop, to somebody who is out there, who is, maybe let me just say, who's not aware or who doesn't have a clear picture of how this colonialism has been dealing with Africa as the continent? How do we help that person to come into reality and understand that the war or the battle that we're facing as the continent of Africa is really huge, and it needs all of us to stand up?
In the book written by Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, the unfortunate part is many of us have gone to school to study, but we came back with knowledge of the other. We came back actually without knowledge. The stuff I'm mentioning, like the books I'm mentioning, are all available. We read through them. But when you read through them, it was just a story that happened in the past, Chinua Achebe. But if you look carefully, that things are falling apart. It was a call. For me, from where I'm sitting, it was actually a prophetic call to say, watch out for this colonization. What it is bringing now, it is breaking the center. The center can no longer hold, which is a key statement in Chinua Achebe's book. And the question you want to ask is not, what is the center of African, ukuba ngumuntu, isintu, ubuntu? What is it that holds an African together?
Yeah.
Because we may understand what holds a Chinaman together, what holds a European together, what holds an American together.
Yeah.
But we're the only group on the whole table that seemingly does not have a center that holds. I say this because Africa remains functioning as countries, not functioning like a continent.
Yeah.
And every time a country tries to do transactions with a continent, that country will be abused. So you have the whole continent of China striking a business deal with Zambia.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 1-point-something billion people who are making a deal with the 30 million people.
Yeah.
You are bound to be abused. You are bound to be victimized. You are bound, sort of the language, to be sodomized. You are bound to end up receiving the wrong end of the deal. Therefore, you cannot begin to understand the depth and the damage of the Berlin Conference in terms of dividing a continent into countries. And until we understand what is it that holds the African at the center, our politics will remain as a peripheral conversation.
Yeah. Now, if you just mentioned something that you have China functioning as the continent, and then you've got Africa functioning as countries. Now, what I want to check is this. If you look at Africa, you look at Somalia, Sudan, you look at Rwanda, those are countries that have been embattled by wars. And if you look at the wars or the conflict in African continent, the conflict occurs within the states and not between the states. What is really causing that type of situation for us?
It's not only war within the peripherals of the state. See, because of the strategies that they would employ, you would find that even there's some cases which can be listed where a neighboring country is incited to cause war with another country. So that you would find that the wars between the Hutu and the Tutsis, the Rwanda story, the Congo story, the Uganda story, and the involvement of the countries that are around the place where they want to do the mining. We know that there's a strong and a big mineral resource in the parts where Uganda, Congo, and Rwanda are meeting. And at the end of the day, the tribes and the nations that are surrounding this particular area that they want, they are all militarized to keep that small little zone in constant war. And the people sponsoring those wars sometimes are not the local governments, but external governments, which are actually selling weapons to these neighboring countries to destabilize those regions. You cannot understand that up to now, the war of Congo will not end. It started off with Leopold. It continued after 20 million people were butchered by Leopold. And to date, Leopold, the King Leopold, has not been dragged to the international court for crimes against humanity. They used to amputate people's hands, chop people's hands, if you refuse to give them the quota of the minerals that they wanted. It's there in the history books. We've gone to history to read it. And we think that it has changed ever since that war in Congo started. To date, that war has not ended. It's a shame. I hold an Apple phone in my hand. And the minerals that are used to making cell phones are found in Congo. Mining is being done by children, which is actually against the human rights. So you have the human rights under the United Nations and everything else. But at the end of the day, we're using Apples and iPads, which are actually coming from the same abuse that we seem to say we are protecting the citizens of the world. But in practical sense, international community, international industrialists who have an interest in the products that are being produced by the African countries, the stability of those countries will mean, therefore, that a country must now negotiate business as business. But as long as there is war, while you guys are busy shooting each other, they are actually mining and taking off minerals away from those countries.
So we will be safe to say that African wars are shaped by global politics.
There is local grid between chiefs and tribes, which we cannot undermine, and that being a domestic misunderstanding, then the global community studies that and they understand it. Then they come to you and they give you a certain amount of weapons. The same group again go to the other group and give them some amount of weapons, and they allow you to fight each other while they're busy looting. So it's simple. You just give guns to some few people, they run into a village, shoot people and chase people, and while people are running away, the miners are coming in to be digging. You must fly, according to the words of Dr. Chiwombori, you must fly in some parts of Congo. And actually you see those mines, jets, 707s, private jets, that are flying in and out of Congo, full of minerals, full of diamonds, full of everything else, while war is cluttering around.
So some people are busy looting on the other side.
Not some people. The Western community, the European community, the American community, the Chinese community are looting Africa. This must be said, not in a beating about the bush. Mining is happening. Look at what happened in Libya. Look at what happened in Iraq. There's lots of information out there that actually while guns were shooting in Baghdad, tanks and pipes of oil were pumping oil out of it. Look at Gaddafi. While you're busy chasing Gaddafi this side, pumps and tanks are actually pulling oil out of Libya. So we understand now that the war we are fighting is not a political war. It's actually an economic war. And the appetite of the West and the East when it comes to resources is much more than what they can supply. So the only way they go about it is to make sure that wherever those materials are found, if they cannot get it through diplomacy, they are getting it through war.
Now, if you look at Africa, Bishop, when we're just looking at it as a continent at large, you'll understand that when we talk of politics, the way I've seen it is that politics in the African continent has been so muchly there's a correlation with it and violence. You think of African continent and politics, there's violence in there. What takes us to that extent of failing maybe to say we're going to have peace talks when we're discussing political stuff, we can just discuss without being violent? What is happening? Is it us Africans, people failing to behave ourselves, or there's somebody who is twisting and turning our minds somewhere?
Power is toxic. Power is toxic. And those who have it will not share it without shedding blood. Because the obsession of ruling is heavy. Secondly, we have African leaders who are trained in the West. And when they come back to Africa, they are not coming back as legitimate leaders. They're actually coming back as wolves in sheepskin. When we look at them, they look like our brothers. They look like our sisters. But when you go to the tables where they are working, when you go to their private spaces where they are signing treaties and signing deals, business interests, which the external world has in that country, many African leaders have converted the economies of the country into their personal private business. At the end of the day, what you are facing is an African on the outside, but a European inside. So we are dealing with what I want to classify as coconut leadership. Coconut leadership, which is black and brown, African in terms of face. But when you look at the software that is running their heads, is actually a colonial system. This is what brings me today to say, I want to start talking to the African common people and say, how do we begin to investigate, question our own software, so that out of that software, we can begin to produce African leaders who are sensitive, who are aware to the African needs and are passionate about African needs. This is the only time me and Donald Trump will agree when he says America first. Man does not mix his words. He says everything that he's doing, his country is having a priority in everything that he's doing. And until the African leader also reaches that moment where he says Africa comes first, we would find that many of the transactions that we are doing are actually at the destruction of the local community and at the improvement of the external businesses.
All right, well, on that note, Bishop, I just want us to take a very quick short break as we are still on discussion of rebooting. We're rebooting the African software. This is Sankofa. We'll be right back after this.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud.
Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary. with StarSat.
Very good morning and a warm welcome to Galaxy News. My name is Sanda Nomusaka Kwabekuto and this is Pan-African Morning. Of course, I'm not going alone. I'm going with my co-host, the one and only, the Pan-African woman, Balisa Matumayane. How are you, my darling?
I'm wonderful, Bakai Sudumelang. Yes, welcome to the Pan-African Morning right here on Galaxy Universal Network.
Galaxy Universal Network is a company owned by 5 directors. As I have said, the CEO is led by our able woman, and we are black-owned company. And as such, part of our mission, vision, sacrifice, and choices is to conquer the African continent. By that I mean from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Algeria, Kenya, Tanzania, from Cape to Cairo, my sister. However, part of our plan and our mission is to provoke the mindsets and the hearts of the African people by telling untold stories in an authentic way, in an unbiased way, in a way that has never been told before.
I think the most important thing in life is about growth. You know? From where you were, I always tell young people we must compete with our yesterday. And I got to prison. I had said, okay, right now they have sentenced me to effective 7 years. So what next? What am I going to do with my time? And I remember telling one of my very good friends, close friend, Nathan Marara, I said to him, you know, when I leave this place, I'm going straight to a man that sentenced me. He was taken aback. He couldn't understand. Why would you go back to a man? Of course, he thought with no temper, wanted to harm this man. I said, it's because that man changed my life. So there's something that's called time. When I'm talking to young people, we must always redeem the time. I no longer live in times, but I live in moments because I understand what the freedom means. So because of the wrong decision that I've made one day, I was told in the most hopeless of places, which was prison. I had to start building all over again.
A very warm welcome back once again. You're still here on Galaxy TV. This is Sankofa as we continue to look at the subject of rebooting the African software. We'll look at it from the perspective of politics, economics, and also trying to do and give you the thinking tools. Well, I'm not alone, as I said. I have my bishop here, Maponga Joshua III is with me. Well, sir, before the break, we just had to touch on, you spoke about the African leaders who are African on the outside. You said it's coconut leadership. You used the term to refer to them. Now, if you look at Africa, since there's been ongoing issues that the continent is facing, there have been a lot of suggestions from politics side, business people trying to say this, if this could be done, the continent may maybe improve. But now, there's a new good governance agenda in Africa that is being imposed. Rather, what is new about that? I mean, what is it bringing to us?
Every time you take over a people and you dehumanize them and you bring your own software to run them, you create a schizophrenic environment where people don't understand exactly what's happening. Let me be very blunt to say, before colonialism came here, we had our own form of governance, indigenous governance systems. And within our own indigenous governance systems, number one, we did not have prisons. 2, we did not have hospitals. 3, we did not have banks. 4, we did not have schools. Fair and fine. But were we able to govern ourselves? Were we able to rule and run our affairs? Now, I'm not saying we go back to the village and we become rural. But in the midst of intelligence, for crying out loud, we can collect some parts of our history which is relevant for today and put it forward. In the midst of it all, China, for example, does not run on democracy. They've formulated based on their feudal system, a bit of their monarchical system, borrowed a bit of their, they call it autocracy, something complicated word, I can't remember it off my hand. But they've come up with their own indigenous method of governance, which actually works for the Chinese people. India, America. And why is it that democracy seems to be a big agenda for the African? And I want to qualify it. It is not democracy if the African is not free. So I don't want us to discuss democracy if we cannot discuss freedom.
Yes.
Because freedom for me is a fundamental principle that must underpin the democracy. So you cannot say a country is democratic, yet people are still languishing in poverty, yet there is still, there's the victimization, there is still marginalization, there is still heavy abuse. And we must classify, before I go very far, we must clarify that the colonialists have raped Africa for the longest of time. And our leaders right now are assisting Western world to continuously rape the African country. There is no African country right now that is not in debt to the Europeans, to the Chinese, and to the Americans. But can I tell you something for free? All these countries, all African countries that are in debt from their colonial masters, the amount of resources the colonialist has taken out of the same country is enough to pay the debt. So you have countries right now in Africa which are still paying taxes to France. We have countries that are still owing the colonizer. After all these years of colonialism and all these years of ripping the country apart, you still walk up front and say, you are owing us. We owe the West nothing. The amount of abuse they've done to us is not worth talking about. I even want to declare that colonial countries, the European countries, which have gone to war with African people, Africa has been in war. People have died. When will the Queen of London be taken to The Hague for crimes against humanity? The blood of Kenya is in her hands. The blood of Tanzania is in her hands. The blood of Malawi is in her hands. The blood of Zambia is in her hands. The blood of Zimbabwe is in her hands. Part of South Africa is in her hands. There are millions of people that have died. Yet we still have our presidents walking up to the Queen and shaking her hand. Nigeria is still recovering from the Queen's hand. There's a trail of blood that colonialism has left in Africa. You want to tell them about democracy? If we believed in democracy, then let's apply the principles of democracy and bring justice to those that were denied the justice.
Let me just give a little bit here, Bishop. I want to go back a bit. Maybe I see it of significance that we should at first maybe give us a breakdown as to when we're talking about the software that needs to be rebooted in the mental state of an African. What exactly are we talking about there?
It starts off as basic as childbirth, into vaccinations, into education, the quality of information you put into them, into his entertainment, into his agriculture, the type of food that he's eating, into his fashion, into his architecture. Finally, by the time you're talking governance, in terms of ownership of land, ownership of resources, IP ownership, even owning intellectual property for an African. For the longest of time, European countries have come here to collect African herbs and to make tablets out of it. You begin to understand when you're talking about software. Literally, I'm using that as a parable to say, is an African right now able to stop this bus which is heading towards the global village and be allowed to think not like a European, but to think like an African. So the question we must really be asking is, what does it mean to be an African? What kind of software goes into thinking like an African? And I cannot give you a better one, but the Ubuntu being the first one. I am because you are. I am because we are. Me and you, we're looking after each other. When you understand that principle in its totality, engrafted and written in our Sankofa history, in terms of our past, and you look today and say, when you make your business and you are thinking right now, are you thinking for yourself? Are you thinking for others? Are you thinking for the community? We understand the American method of running, on the American dream, the European industrialization and machinery, the Eastern kind of concept. But what is the African, the Southern way of thinking? And for me, our community and our sense of community binding, how do we live together? as a community? How do we grow together as a community? How do we share resources together? Ilima, for example, Izunde, for example, Shandira Pamwe, Ujama, these all concepts of how do we work together as a community? And for me, when you destroy that software and you put the great I, me and my wife and my child, I don't care about anybody else, then you begin to see that software on its own, how does it translate itself? You begin to become selfish, you become capitalistic, you want to collect much for yourself, and then drive your car through the poor communities, and you are the biggest man in town, and the poverty and the misery of the other people stops being of your concern, as long as you are doing fine. Africans, we don't think like that. That's why when I greet you, Sawubona. How many are you?
It's only me. You're talking to me alone.
But why am I making it plural?
Yeah. Quite interesting.
Are you following?
Quite interesting.
So therefore, when we, as Africans, we don't view at each other, hi, how are you?
So it is. We'll say that, Bishop, from creation, I should put it that way. We as Africans have been designed to be people who are communal than being individualistic.
We are the original people on the face. We are the mothers of civilization, and for that reason, we cannot wait for children to teach us how to build a sustainable community. Africa has built civilizations in the past, established kingdoms from Peru to India to China and the entire continent of Africa.
I think, Bishop, we shouldn't leave any stone unturned here. Just a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned how, let me just say the Queen specifically, as you put it, that how the role rather that she played. You even mentioned that the blood, she has blood in her hands. Can you just go a little bit down on that? What exactly enrolled in those events? What are we talking about there when we're saying that she's accountable for the death of the people in Nigeria, be it partial in South Africa and in other countries that you've mentioned?
Read the book entitled The British Gulag. And you understand how the Mau Mau Wars took place, how the Kenyan people lost their land. That history is there on the table of the Queen. I'm not making accusations. I'm just relating history as is. I lost my relatives during the Zimbabwe struggle. That I know, blood relatives, my aunts, my cousins, and etc., who did not come back from war. Every country that was colonized had to fight to get the democracy. The question is that on their way to democracy, how many people were maimed, how many people were killed? I mean, I with all due respect, I understand that the Jews could make a big story about the 2 million people that died in Germany in terms of the Holocaust. It's a big holiday that is being celebrated on the face of the earth to all the Jews, remembering what Hitler did to the Jews. Those are how many people?
2 million people.
2 million people. If you can just glance on the left and look at how many people died
in Africa
during slave trade, how many people died during the wars in Africa. We're not even talking complicated wars like biological wars, environmental contamination, experiments on vaccines and stuff like that. We're not even talking of economic poverty that resulted in hunger and etc. We're not talking about AIDS and about Ebola. We're not even talking the corona problem that we are now having. And we are really talking, take a gun, you as a queen, you sponsor a war because you have all the gold that you took from the African people into your palace. Now you convert your gold into guns, and you come back and shoot the same people who gave you the gold, and you shoot each other, and there's war, and people are killed. And why are you killing them? Because you don't want them to rule themselves. You don't want them to have access to their resources. You don't want to lose your business. So you as a colonizer, you actually pick a gun to press the people down so that they don't rule themselves. So understand that. That war is founded on governance. People are saying, we want to rule ourselves and have ownership of our resources. But because you have better guns, look at KwaZulu-Natal. Look at KwaZulu-Natal. How many people? Blood River. Why do you call it Blood River?
Yeah, a lot of people died.
Who has ever accounted for those people?
Nobody.
Show me. You talk about truth and reconciliation, and truth and reconciliation only looks at between 1980, 1985 to 1994. So who are the people? Then you isolate Boson and what and what, 2-3 people. And these are the people who actually caused problems in Africa. Are you serious? Are you serious?
Because I really do think also maybe at some point we should visit the issue of Blood River, because I think there's a story behind that, what happened there. But then on that note also, I would like to know, Bishop, from you, as to you have people, history has it. It is detailed in history.
When you use the word history,
yes,
speak slowly.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 2 words.
It's 2 words.
His
story.
So when you are talking history, the question is, whose story
are you talking about?
Are we telling?
All right.
So the history of the African cannot be told by the colonizer.
Yeah. Africans have to tell their own history.
They are telling their story. The other day I was walking in Durban in one of those graveyards next to the broadcasting there.
Yeah, and SABC there.
Yes, they deleted it. I went there now recently because I wanted to take a picture and put it on the thing. There's a big placard there of British soldiers. Yeah. And at the bottom is died. Here is a gallant group of soldiers who died while fighting the savages. Okay?
Now, but I want to check this out.
Are you following?
Yeah, I'm following you. I want to check this out though. Like you said, history is saying that the Queen has a hand in such shameful events. What makes them, or how are they superior to the system or the policy, the justice system of the world? Why are they not being held accountable for that?
Money.
Who
sponsors The Hague? Who are the fundamental sponsors of the crimes against humanity? It is the same people who are the colonizers. Netherlands will house and build a building called it. Here, we're going to be discussing world politics. I want to know, when are they going to take the American president for Vietnam?
Yeah.
When are you going to take the presidents for Chechnya, for Croatia, for Afghanistan, for Libya, for Syria, for the entire African continent and the wars that we fought? Who will ever be honest enough to say, we really want to discuss crimes against humanity? Or is it humanity only for the Europeans?
Yeah.
And savagery for the Africans? We as Africans. The other day I was watching, they wanted to take Taylor on the platform and say, Charles Taylor for the wars in Libya. Okay, fine. It's nice for you to make a demonstration out of one African leader for the crimes against his own country. But if we can look just into the history book to qualify, are you really saying Taylor is the biggest criminal that you want to bring to the Hague when the Queen is sitting in her palace with her white gloves, busy doing some stitches for her poodles and her dogs?
Now, Bishop,
are you serious?
Yeah, no, I get it. Now, how does the governance or politics affect the development and the environment?
Government and politics gives a leader instruments of power. Instruments of power. That includes the military, that includes power to collect taxes, that includes policing, that includes prisons. So that when you default, we can dump you in prison, we can incarcerate you, we can remove you from the community. So in political power comes with some benefits in that regard, in terms of making decisions over a certain jurisdiction. And when you give that power to the wrong hands, then that power has lots of chances of being abused and being manipulated for the benefit of the one who is running it. Worse still, when the local leader does not have full control over what is happening, but he is constantly listening to what the external and the outside world is telling him that he must do. I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant and rude, but why would America announce something and the following morning African countries are announcing it also? Even on this corona thing, let's just agree, maybe at a light note. Now we're going to be closing things, Donald Trump talks. And in the morning, I watched the video the other day, more than 8 presidents around the country were actually saying it word for word, as Trump had said it. Now you want to ask yourself, are we stupid? When you look at us and we went to school to study, we're not coming back as stooges. We also can read between the lines and say, hi, come on guys, no.
This is not it.
No. Stop putting cotton wool on our faces. There's the baboon's hand in this thing here. There's some mischief happening in here. So we understand that the local African countries, actually, while they are trying to govern African continent, their ears are being whispered. Someone is whispering to the African presidents what to do and what not to do. Why would Ramaphosa make a statement in parliament? We are taking back our land. Who was the first one to respond?
Yeah.
Who was the first one to respond? Donald Trump.
Trump responded, yeah?
Why are you responding, Trump? Are you a president of South Africa?
It's not your place. Your
no, you cannot touch that. Why? Because the white community, these Alcatel, this group of colonizers, they are in conversation as a group. And when you touch one of them, all of them respond. And they're connected to power. So that when you think you are running your own local politics, when in fact you are running external politics in a local hand. Now, if I was the preacher, I would say, the voice is the voice of Jacob. But the hands,
it's Esau.
It's Esau.
Yeah, interesting, amazing. Now, Bishop, here's another thing. You just mentioned that politics or governance, it renders power. Now, what I want to view in an African perspective now, to say that we have leaders in Africa. How, just before we go to the break in short, how are the African leaders handling power in your own view? Are we doing justice to the power being rendered to us, or it is just the face to say they have power, but they are not necessarily in power?
African leaders are rude. African leaders are arrogant. Many African leaders are uneducated. They may have books, but they are totally ignorant. One, they don't respect their communities. Two, they don't respect their cultures. Three, they don't respect the nature of how they must use government resources to empower the same people that they are ruling. African leaders are not leading African people. They are leading the European agenda. They are leading the colonial agenda.
Well, let's just quickly go to a very quick short break there. It is still a Sankofa down here on Galaxy TV with Petros Msweli. I'm with Bishop Joshua Maponga III. We still have more for you as we look at rebooting the software of an African. We'll be back just right after this. Stay tuned.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa. As we stand out amongst the rest. And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on Starset. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
Experience the extraordinary.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Have you lost it? Move!
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
Challenge your ordinary.
Why don't you start a dance class?
Experience the extraordinary with Starset.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with Starset.
Welcome back. You're still watching Sankofa here on Galaxy TV as we're looking at rebooting the African software. It is that time. We're still at Bishop. We're looking at the history of African politics and what exactly is happening and its contribution to the happenings of the present age. Bishop, before the break, we did just break down a little bit as to how are those people escaping being called into accountability for their crimes against humanity? But now, what I want to check with you here is that how firmly has democracy taken root in Africa?
It's a pot plant. Democracy has remained as a pot plant. Because until this foreign concept of governance is given root on the African people, to indigenize it, to rework it, to restructure it, and with due respect to indigenous knowledge systems, it remains as this policy that sits in our government, where even those that are running it don't understand how it works, honestly speaking. I mean, you look at what is freedom. In an African concept, freedom is preservation of the individual, preservation of a community, and preservation of a society. So your freedom is not your freedom until the family and the community is also free. So we don't deal with the great individual as the substance of a community. We deal with the community actually having an understanding and how best they protect your interest as an individual. So when you look at the democratic system, that comes up with the first statement being the I. You as an individual, you have a right. You don't have a right. You don't have a right to be cutting a tree, a fruit tree, which feeds the whole community. Yes, it's your right to cut an axe and go and chop it and say, I have a right. But after you've exercised your right, how many people are starving around? So the whole idea for me of positioning democracy, firstly as an individual's perspective of interpreting reality, becomes wrong, fundamentally wrong. But when the community works together, then we preserve each other. We think for each other. And when one element amongst us seems or acts outside of the preservation of the community, then that becomes a crisis. We must deal with the individual. So democracy for me fails, the very first statement, where it begins to declare your individual rights. It must be turned upside down. The community's rights. Right? That's why we find many of our leaders, when they get into power, they exercise their rights. Why is that when the president has stolen money from the country, then at the end of the day, we just want to get the president arrested or do something? No. We arrest the man in Africa. We collect what the man has stolen. We redistribute it into the places where he has stolen it from. The wealth of Mobutu Sese Seko is in Switzerland. In the midst of democracy. If the Swiss were serious, why not sit in the government and say, we are sitting around with 3 billion here that was stolen from the Congo people. What do you lose? Let's take this money, because we know it is the president through private deals who did and made this money. Let's collect this money and give it back to the people.
Now, I want to check it out here, that how did the Westerns implant, which I might refer to as a virus, in our software as Africans? How did they implant this virus of having us to be greedy to an extent that we take away even from our own people?
The wars of the Titans. You put a Trojan horse into the city, and then you destroy the city from within. The African people have been infiltrated, and our greatest enemies now are no longer the outsiders, in as much as they are. But our greatest and our weakest link are our politicians, who are in harlotry, in prostitution with the Western world. And they are prostituting on our resources as a continent.
A warning. You issued it last time on our first segment of the show. You did issue a warning. What would you say, just maybe let me just say a words of wisdom to the African leaders, because I think it's very significant that we do issue those words out. What would be your words of wisdom to such people who have been, I'd say, held captive by the Westerns mentally, and thus having African people struggling to survive under their leadership?
I want to warn African presidents to stop thinking of themselves as bigger than the people. I want to warn the African presidents. They must look at history as to what has happened to some of the African dictators in the past, who think that by becoming a leader, you are actually the most powerful. You can never be more powerful than the people. And true. As you are growing now, in this century that we are growing in, if you don't take my advice seriously, we are going to find your head hanging somewhere else. Because the youth we are now leading are not interested in the politicking and always, sorry for the language, wiping the feet of the white man. We are now dealing with proper justice systems we would want to see that our dignity is restored and we are respected as individuals and as human beings. We cannot be in a continent which has the greatest amount of resources and yet we are the poorest. I mean, I was in Nigeria the other day and I watched this pipe with a sticker on it, British Petroleum.
British in Nigeria.
Driving through the Delta with villages on the left and on the right of abject poverty.
Yeah.
And this pipe, it's not a pipe, it's a pipe, this huge pipe, it's pulling oil,
it's oil
out of Nigeria, even written British Petroleum, going to fuel the streets of London, and where the resources are being found, those people are living in poverty.
There's indigenousness in there. Now, Bishop, here's the thing which is very interesting. Now, I want to take it as you were looking at rebooting the system, the software rather, of Africans. Now, in the midst of such issues, political unrest, we've got these issues whereby we're struggling in many ways. What should be our thinking? How should we channel our mindsets?
The first bus stop, which we need to talk about, I know it sounds like a long road, but I'm not here to be planting vegetables because I want us to harvest fruits. He who plants vegetables will never eat a fruit salad. The first bus stop, which I want to make a challenge to all African governments, you need to destroy the Western curriculum of education. Stop teaching our people stupid little poems of Europeans and William Shakespeare. Stop teaching our children useless curriculum of how many legs does a grasshopper have. We need to start having correct education of how do we emancipate ourselves, how do we harvest indigenous knowledge system, and teach us a correct historical background. With that knowledge system, it must filter into our entertainment so that we can put the correct role models in the minds of our children. A good role model is not driving a Porsche Cayenne, and a good role model is the one who has built up a community. Hence, many of our educated people, immediately when they get educated, they subtract themselves from their own communities and they go and live in the white suburbs. Why in the white suburbs? Because black people don't understand them. Black people, they can no longer relate with them. Black people will not help them to enjoy their wealth. So what is education? As we have it right now, education is a passport to walk away from African culture into European culture. Then you find all these educated guys with small little stupid bow ties coming up for some dinners, bottles of champagne in their hands, and the couture and the crockeries of Western civilization are the dream of every African. Maybe I've reached it now. I've reached the level to be accepted. So how do you greet the queen? How do you shake hands with it? How do you sit? How do you talk? How do you what? My foot. These are cosmetics of African culture. We cannot be teaching our children to become plastics in a civilization that is so heavy. And Africans needed to put their feet on the ground and establish their own personhood.
Before we go to a very short break, Bishop, I just want to know this. Does the political engagement of ethnic identities inevitably generate violence in Africa?
Does the
political engagement of ethnic identities inevitably generate violence in Africa?
You are asking me a secondary question.
Yeah.
The primary question is, when you divide people and you say you are Shangan, you are Zulu, you are Venda, and you come up with locations, Soweto, Sutus, what, and Soshanguve, Shanganis, Vendas, and what, and you divide the people into Bantustans. You classify, you cut roads around them. And what are you doing? By de-associating people from each other, you create war. Now, here's a complicated problem, which is me. My grandmother on my father's side is Shangan, from the Sena tribes of Mozambique. My grandmother on my mother's side is Venda, the Mbedzi tribes, down in South Africa, the Sidibas. My grandfather on my father's side is Zulu, the Mzuligas group that came up to Zimbabwe. Yes. Musbanda, Mkladonga Shlualita, Umgonyam. Then my grandfather on my father's side is Karanga, from the great Mtapa kingdom himself. Now, you want to tell me about tribal wars? So who do I fight?
Because I'm seemingly related to all those people.
So who do I fight?
It's your family.
So it's ignorance of who we are. If you go to Malawi and you find a banda, that is a Sibanda in Zimbabwe, which is the lion. That is a Mtaung in South Africa.
South Africa, yeah.
That is Mngonyama in KwaZulu-Natal. That is Ntsivande in Swaziland. Now, when you begin to find Ntsivande killing Mngonyama killing Mtaung killing Sibanda, and Sibanda telling a banda from Malawi that you are not together with us. Yeah. In other words, our totemic collection as Africans supersedes our passports and our small little village politics. Piri in Malawi is the monkey, which is Tswene, Ukabo, Ufakudze, Umtolo, Uchambase, Ulisa in the Xhosa tribes.
Yeah.
Shoko Fudzijena, Mkanya in the Zimbabwe. Yeah. One big monkey, Uskosana in Kwandebele. It's the same monkey. So when you don't understand your ethnographical connections as Africans, we must actually come one day and do a program fully on the connectivity of African totems.
Yeah.
Then you can understand we cannot be killing each other because we don't understand our ethnographical connection to each other. We are one people as Bantu people. Yeah. And it is totally unheard of that as Africans, when you look at the skin, melanin, and you look at someone else with the same melanin like you must actually find out, how am I related to this? Now, in my case, when I understand my 4 branches that are flowing in me, which is the Shangani blood, the Venda blood, the Zulu Ndebele blood, and the Shona blood, then I pick up my 4 grandfathers. This one had a husband, this one had a husband, this one had a father, this one had a father. Which families are they coming from? Which families are they coming from? You actually discover 3 steps backwards. I'm actually attached to more than 32, if not 64 tribes.
Well, Bishop, let's just, for now, we're just going to take a very quick short break. But after the break, we continue with Sankofa down here on Galaxy TV. It is I, Petros, with the Bishop Maponga. You stay tuned because we're coming back right after this.
Some water, please.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show.
It was a legacy left by the apartheid government. Yeah. It's very important that for business people, whether they are especially SMMEs, in doing business with developing countries.
The measurements, on the other hand, that have been introduced to deal with COVID-19 have harmed our economy beyond what I think has even been measured.
The giants like China realizing that the US and Europe are losing the grip in the world economy, and Africa was a playground.
Many of black people's small businesses in particular are not even registered.
Any country that has ever been reliant on IMF has never been able to come out.
Africa is indebted to Asia and Europe.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show, a show that discusses economic fundamentals with a focus on small businesses. Tune into Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show on Galaxy Universal Network, channel 500 on Starset.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show.
It was a legacy left by the apartheid government. Yeah. It's very important that for business people, whether they are especially SMMEs, in doing business with developing countries.
The measurements, on the other hand, that have been introduced to deal with COVID-19 have harmed our economy beyond what I think has even been measured.
The giants like China realizing that the US and Europe are losing the grip in the world economy, and Africa was a playground.
Many of black people's small businesses in particular are not even registered.
Any country that has ever been reliant on IMF has never been able to come out.
Africa is indebted to Asia and Europe.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show, a show that discusses economic fundamentals with a focus on small businesses. Tune into Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show on Galaxy Universal Network, channel 500 on Starset.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show.
It was a legacy left by the apartheid government. It's very important that for business people, whether they are especially SMMEs, in doing business with developing countries.
The measurements, on the other hand, that have been introduced to deal with COVID-19 have harmed our economy beyond what I think has even been measured.
The giants like China realizing that the US and Europe are losing the grip in the world economy, and Africa was a playground.
Many of black people's small businesses in particular are not even registered.
Any country that has ever been reliant on IMF has never been able to come out.
Africa is indebted to Asia and Europe.
Welcome to Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show, a show that discusses economic fundamentals with a focus on small businesses. Tune into Amandla Omnoto Business Talk Show on Galaxy Universal Network, channel 500 on Starset.
Welcome back. You're still watching Sankofa here on Galaxy TV. It is Petros with Bishop Maponga III on the studio as we're looking at rebooting the software of Africans in that way. But then on the first segment of our show, we had looked at the history of politics and how did the events of the past contributed on what is currently happening in Africa. Well, as Sankofa, we look at the past, we analyze the present, but then we also take a glimpse of what could happen in the near future. Now, on the second hour, Bishop, I want us to just jump into the perspective of an economical perspective rather, in Africa. If you look at, firstly, if I could maybe just go there to say, Africa has been depicted as the dark continent or a savage country by Europeans. What was the cause of all that in your own view on that way?
We have words in our African language like Ilima or Zunde or Shandira Pamwe, where in a village you plow your fields. And in the event that you have plowed far much more than you can handle, then you prepare some traditional brew, kill a goat or a chicken, whatever you can, a few chickens, and then you take a kudu horn and you stand on the side of the mountain. Boo, boo. And we used to call that a ngome in my tribe. Then the community comes together to your house. Then they assist you to plow your field. Understand? Whether it is plowing or it is harvesting or it is whatever, they help you for a day or two. Then another day, someone also calls, we go there, we help, we go there, we help. So that the community actually had a way of developing its own network, its own support system, and its own cooperative of working together so that we uplift each other. In the event an old lady there does not have a cattle to plow and etc., the community would actually go there and plow. In some certain cases, would donate a cow each or a bull, whatever it is, an ox each, to assist, to plow, to work together. And I'm trying to look at this concept of economics. We will mess up the African software if you are talking economics in terms of JSEs. And you are talking of African economy in terms of, we had a multi-streams of income as Africans. And how was that structured? You were doing your plowing, which gave you the agriculture. And even in the agriculture, you were only not plowing one seed. You had a variety of seeds that were there.
That's correct.
We had one stream of income, which was animal husbandry. In animal husbandry, you're not just keeping cows. You have cows, you have goats, you have sheep, you have donkeys, you have everything else. So it's multi-streamed. You come to the whole idea again of architecture and skills and other things, so that at the end of the day, Our work was seasonally driven. During the rain season, there's some business that we're doing. During winter, there's some business we're doing. During autumn and etc. And these businesses, again, were being run in a barter system. In other words, when I have harvested enough of what I have, I come to you, I give you what I have, you give me what I have. Money is the greatest devil we have ever received. I read one statement that says, if you have gold, you have money. Anyone who buys it from you has sold you debt. Simply meaning, when you are holding the gold in your hand, then why do you need papers? Because paper is a representation of what you're already holding. Therefore, we don't need to think in a Eurocentric system where you dig the ground, mess up the resources, take that gold, fit it in a small little storeroom somewhere underneath the palace of the queen, and then you say you are rich. And yet the environment which you have destroyed can no longer be plowed on. I'm looking at Johannesburg with these mountains of cyanide that are sitting around here. Only the Lord knows where that water is seeping into the ground, what it's doing to the water table, and what quality of water we are drinking. And yet the people who dug these mines are sitting in Dubai, enjoying the benefits of being the first miners in South Africa. When you talk about economics, you cannot talk about economics without an understanding of environmental intelligence, EQ, environmental intelligence. For your money that you have, I mean, the other day I was just thinking, sitting by myself, this world thinks that it is driving me towards civilization. And I said, sis, 7 IR is a time where we manufacture nothing, we own nothing, but we have everything. Okay, let's take for granted. Let's make the whole of Africa into another New York City with concrete buildings, with waterways, and aeroplanes flying everywhere. Now there we are, another Johannesburg throughout Africa. Question number 1, what quality of water are we drinking? Question number 2, what quality of air are we breathing? Question number 3, what quality of food are we eating? We go to the West, where people are becoming environmentally conscious. I saw a picture the other day, some Europeans and white people hugging trees, apologizing what they've done to the jungles in the Amazon. Organic food. Now the African is already organic by being indigenous. Colonialism and industrialization, which supplies us with plastic foods and plastic clothes, must warn these women who think that their breasts look nice because they're putting on some plastic bras. Remind them that when they sweat, the plastic that is in those bras is absorbed into their systems, makes part of the cancer problems that we are dealing with. You think that you're educated by putting on plastic pads when you're going on your periods. What are the side effects of these things? The medicines that we are drinking, the plastic foods that we're eating, high blood pressure, diabetes, the dilapidation of the African cultural system, simply defined, is the destruction of the human beings themselves in terms of the people. In the Kalahari, where the Bushmen are still living, we say they are primitive because we've been to school. But that's the most educated community that you have.
Now, I want to take us just back down here in South Africa specifically. We have our credit ratings being done outside the country. In fact, outside of the continent, you have your S&P, you have your Moody's, you have your Fitch and Gold. The Fitches rather, they are giving us to say you are only able to borrow this much. How is it that we have this problem in Africa whereby our own economical state is being judged from the outside? What has happened to us? Why can't we have a say for ourselves in our own currency and also be able to say, no, we can do this because we can afford to do this and that, but rather it's somebody from the outside who's saying you cannot do 1, 2, and 3 now, you are in recession now and so forth.
You are running African politics and African economics with a false software of JSEs and the stock exchanges. Simply meaning that external people are actually investing in your country, taking money in and out as when they please. The way we've structured our economic system is not indigenous, number 1. 2, we're running African countries as countries in terms of our economics. At the end of the day, national budgets can never compete with continental budgets. The time I'll begin to have this conversation with you seriously is when Africa has one currency. And we have one trade area. Where Libya comes to Southern Africa, bring us the oil. We give them the meal and maize in exchange of the oil. We begin to do our bartering system to improve the lifestyles of our own people. But the financial and economic structures which are situated in a building in Sandton, and people are busy ticking on a mouse where they should move their money to. The people that are in Alexander, people that are in Soweto, people that are in Harare, people in Mozambique, 20, 30 years after independence and democracy, their lives have not changed. They are still drinking the same sewage water that is coming from the houses of the rich.
You're talking about having Africa also with one currency. But recently, I think it was 2018, whereby we had BRICS in South Africa, then whereby also there was a deal being pushed to say there was a free African trade kind of deal to be signed. You have an African country, Nigeria specifically, who said they are not going to be part of that deal. How then do we achieve that when it's seemingly more like, as the continent, there is division amongst ourselves?
That's why I'm saying that when an African leader thinks for himself, and his presence in governmental institutions is to protect his interest and his friends, and he's playing the game with the external community that are influencing his decision. The real question is, are the Nigerian common people interested in a local trade area, a common trade area?
Very good.
What benefits will this do to the common Nigerian community when you can now begin to trade with each other nicely? Why is that? Why are African governments using their government instruments to frustrate African progress? What interest is it? When Nigeria says no, who is saying so? Is it the government? Is it the leader? And why are they saying so? What benefit? What disadvantage? So immediately you begin to ask some of those questions. You may actually see at the end of the day that there's another deal, there's another transaction that the leader has signed with the external parties, whether it is American and etc. Now BRICS comes in with Russia. How does that affect the international politics? So we have big, fat, white men sitting behind doors who are deciding how the politics of the world must run. Because to them, it is a business interest. They have nothing to do with the human beings. If they cared enough about people, they should have by now allowed people just to eat. I mean, I look at the concept of I can't breathe. We're not asking for much, guys. We're just asking for air to breathe. Just for us to be able to plant our food and eat it. Just enough to be able to walk across. Imagine me from Zimbabwe, from my grandmother being in Venda. I must go to Harare and get a passport to visit my grandmother who is in Venda. We're not asking for too much when you say break down the borders, because they're not practical. I must get a passport from Marara to go to Mozambique to visit my grandmother's house. Are we saying we're African? So we understand that African politics is actually being managed by Western interests, and that's a fact.
Now, this is what I'll do. How then do we ensure the steady financing for our significant needs for sustainable development in an increasingly uncertain global environment?
Firstly, we need to destroy European businesses by boycotting them and investing our monies in local businesses so that we can begin to share our money amongst ourselves as Africans. I want to see something. If we can, all of us can walk up to the bank tomorrow and we withdraw our money and we place it in an African bank amongst ourselves. I want to see something. When we can boycott the foods that are in these chain shops that are selling us junk foods that are giving us diseases, and we invest.
What if they impose sanctions, just like Trump threatened the Chinese?
You're already in sanctions. Who said you're not in sanctions?
Okay.
You're already in sanctions. You're a junk state. What are you waiting for?
Right. Well, let's just take a very quick short break there, Bishop. It's seemingly getting right where we want it to go. This is Sankofa. We're here on Galaxy TV. We'll be back just right after this. Stay tuned.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on Starset. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
Experience the extraordinary.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Have you lost it? Move!
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
Challenge your ordinary.
Why don't you start a dance class?
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
Very good morning and a warm welcome to Galaxy News. My name is Sanda Nomusaka Kobekuto and this is Pan-African Morning. Of course, I'm not going alone. I'm going with my co-host, the one and only, the Pan-African woman, Balisa Matumian. How are you, my darling?
I'm wonderful, Bakai Sudumelang. Yes, welcome to the Pan-African Morning right here on Galaxy Universal Network.
Galaxy Universal Network is a company owned by 5 directors. As I have said, the CEO is led by our able woman, and we are black-owned company. And as such, part of our mission, vision, sacrifice, and choices is to conquer the African continent. By that I mean from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Algeria, Kenya, Tanzania, from Cape to Cairo, my sister. However, part of our plan and our mission is to provoke the mindsets and the hearts of the African people by telling untold stories in an authentic way, in an unbiased way, in a way that has never been told before.
I think the most important thing in life is about growth. You know? From where you were, I always tell young people that we must compete with our yesterday. And I got to prison. I had said, okay, right now they have sentenced me to effective 7 years. So what next? What am I going to do with my time? And I remember telling one of my very good friends, close friend, Marara, I said to him, you know, when I leave this place, I'm going straight to a man that sentenced me. He was taken aback. He couldn't understand. Why would you go back to a man? Of course, he thought I wanted to harm this man. I said, it's because that man changed my life. So there's something that's called time. When I'm talking to young people, we must always redeem the time. I no longer live in times, but I live in moments because I understand what the freedom means. So because of the wrong decision that I've made one day, I was told I'm in the most hopeless of places, which was the prison. I had to start building all over again.
A very warm welcome back. You're still with us here on Galaxy TV. This is Sankofa. We're looking back at the history, analyzing the present, and also giving you insight of what the future could look like for Africa. Well, I'm still with the Bishop, Joshua Maponga J here. Sir, we're talking on terms of now the economics in the African continent. Firstly, I've noted that if you look at the way in which the Europeans, they somehow projected their authority in African countries, what was unique about that? Because it shaped the manner in which our economy functions, the manner in which our politics functions. What is it that they did so uniquely to ensure that in their territories they project this and then they achieve the goal they wanted to?
Let's not glorify violence. There's nothing unique. All you're doing is military bulldozing, military power to override the local communities. We did not cooperate. We have history in our hands where kings were killed and slaughtered and butchered, and illegitimate kings were put into power so that they can have access to the same resources. So there was nothing unique about it. They were just violent. And they were violent militarily, now they are violent economically. So they've not changed. Basically, there's nothing peculiar except to understand how you use military power to override a community.
Yeah, before the break, you spoke about saying that it will do Africa best to boycott European businesses to boycott European food supply and so forth. Now, what do we have to fall on? If we boycott those, what do we have? Do we have enough or not enough? Rather than say, do we have the strength now at this stage, looking at the damage that has been done? Do we have enough to fall on to say, if we boycott this, we'll survive with this?
Firstly, I need to address African respect and dignity. Your question is painful because I have to look at a raped victim who is lying on the ground, who thinks that they deserved to be raped. And at the end of the day, you want to tell the victim how to clean the shoes of the rapist. Because apparently the rapist is the one who is giving him the house to stay in. And we are dealing right now, the question for me is a question of slavery mentality. And we are now struggling to say, where do we fall back to? What would we do? All we know is to be colonized. What can we do without colonization? So that the damage is deep when you think at that level. Let's raise the argument a bit louder and say where we are now as African countries, we are no longer as poor as they think we are. For we have never been that poor. Our problem has been leadership, distribution of our resources, and allowing us to make business deals based with us as basic interest. We have companies in South Africa here, and in the whole of Africa, that are selling us gadgets, cars, that are selling us equipment and etc. Can I be very frank with you?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
60 or 80% of all the minerals which make those equipments are minerals which are coming from us. So you want to know how to do business? I will fold my hands and say, I will not give you minerals until you are willing to respect me as a human being. They may give you sanctions for 3, 4, 5 days. But by the time they want to start production on the second week, where are the resources that they need to continue with the production? A small thing like coffee, for example, if Africa can fold its arms on sending coffee to Europe, the entire coffee market, plus the chocolate market, will come on its knees. Because they don't even have one tree in Europe which plants coffee. And the amount of appetite Europeans have for coffee will bring them to their knees. They will all have headaches by sunset if they don't have their coffee. So we need to understand how do we negotiate business deals with the external world and making our African people as priority. I always would mention Dubai for me is a fantasy city, a good example of how a country which has nothing can convert its nothingness into a biggest investment station on the face of the world. Yet it's a desert. How have they done it? They took their own oil, they beneficiated for themselves. If you are born and you're born in the country, in UEA, you have rights, you have access to X and X. Tell me, what is the value of Africa and why are we living in such poverty? I want to echo again, even the words of Lumumba, and say our greatest deficiency in Africa is that of leadership. We have a deficiency of leadership. The leadership that we have are thugs, they are thieves, they are criminals, and they are not honest.
So could that be also the reason why, when it comes to negotiating with the Europeans, we just go down on our knees, we go down without a fight. Whatever they say, we take it, we apply it for the sake of individualistic gains?
Who amongst our African presidents could actually say you are signing a deal with China? Now, I saw a poster the other day in India. The Chinese are selling land. It's even written in Chinese.
In India, though?
No, here in Zambia.
Here in Zambia?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Chinese are selling Zambian land. Who in their right minds would be watching that and actually say, but when they give you money, it comes with terms and conditions. And some of the terms and conditions are actually going on to say you are selling the next generation into the slavery based on the death that you are creating in your own generation.
But now, if I may ask just this question, if you look at the China's surging interest in Africa, how should we view that? Because Chinese, I think in the African continent, they are knocking in every country's door. They want to donate funds. They want to build relationships. What is happening? How do we view that?
They are not donating anything. Chinese people are expanding their territory. They're expanding it with one agenda: having access to resources. Please underline that. All they're looking for is how can they get the resources of Africa and move them back to their country in China. They are not here to build China, to build Africa. They built up an airport the other day in one of these countries. The country failed to run the airport. Now they're saying, no, because you cannot pay us, can you please give us this airport? We are going to run it. Now, how can you give out a national security entity to the hands of a foreigner to manage it? Now, if you give them the airport, question, do you have control over the flights that are coming in and out of the country? Can you control the immigration of the imports and exports that are going? So basically they're saying, you cannot run your country, allow us to run the export of the whole. And when they run it, now what are you doing as a government? You remain walking around with your government cars, driving, going to parliament with 16 bodyguards in the first. For crying out loud, my foot, you don't call yourself a president. You are less than a dog.
But why is it that we in African continent, we're seemingly struggling to truly diversify our economies? What is the struggle there?
We don't fail. We have instruments of governance that limit us. I mean, look at the sectors right now. I saw a poster the other day on Thursday that the government has just released a statement that says selling mhlonyana is not legal. To me, imagine you stopping an African from doing business with his own resources. So you have laws of that govern business. You cannot do this. Once you do it, you must go to SABS, you must go what? There's legislation after legislation. So you have actually, the African must jump so many hurdles just for him to make it in life. You have your own resources. You cannot even put them on the public market because the government legislation and economic principles and laws that have been put around the country don't allow it to function.
Now, because we have, what I'm looking at is that we have diversification. It's now a slogan. Everybody talks about it, but the debate on how do we truly achieve it, it's very shallow. Few people talk about it. Why is it that in the African continent, once again, the leaders, they are so good on uttering words that will make people vote for them, make people speak well of them, but when it's time to act upon what they're saying, it becomes a different story.
You talk of diversification. I would rather talk of beneficiation. Okay. That maybe it is a better way of creating employment. Yeah. Diversification, maybe you're talking to the plurality of how we approach business. But for me, it's a basic thing. Let's go to Marikana. Yeah. The most uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, very.
Let's dig up platinum.
Yeah.
Valuable as it is. Question number one. What do you use platinum for? What is the value of platinum? What do they make with it? Then when you find out what they make with it, you're gasping for air.
I was going there, but then let me just let you go on.
You have this precious mineral. Yeah. And by the way, just between Rustenburg and Pretoria, I read a small little desktop research. There's 18 trillion reserves of platinum, which is enough to pay the entire debt of Africa, including the 500 billion that we just borrowed. But that resource is in the hands of foreigners. And you guys are just good as employees who must be paid. And even for that, you must be killed for asking for 11,000 rand salary at the end of the month. Okay, let's not get into politics. I'm in South Africa here. I still want to continue my stage before I'm excluded from it. Now, you look at that resource and you say, when we nationalize that resource, I'm not just talking nationalization in a reckless sense. If the government notices that this is a national asset that we have, good. Now, as government, Department of Trade and Industry, access money, build industries in Rustenburg, dig the mineral here, make the products, send back or send out platinum slightly beneficiated. By then you'll have created 10 to 15 times more jobs than just the miners. But right now we're fighting over a mine. We're not fighting over the resource itself. And until we understand how do we beneficiate our resources, then your diversification comes there. That from the mineral itself, how do you create other industries that diversify and feed into that? Diamonds, for example. We're not just good for digging up stones and they end up on the Queen's crown. That's not it. There's two industries that build up and make these rings and sell them. You cannot come back to Africa and say, I bought a ring in Tiffany's and I paid 65,000. When you can buy the same ring for 5,000 in Sandton. In your own country. It has to do with us understanding our own value. So let's not talk much about diversification without understanding how do we beneficiate our own resources and wealth that we have as Africans.
Seemingly, due to all these events, occurrences that are happening, it is without a doubt that the growth of African continent is being hindered or slowed down. Now, how will we improve the quality of growth in Africa and ensure that we create jobs for the people who are the natives?
Number one, we cannot build economies on irreplaceable resources. That's a fact. In the short term, it looks like a solution. In the long term, it's not a solution. You can dig up all the minerals. At the end of the day, you're going to end up with ghost houses. Because when the minerals are finished, you cannot replace them. Are you following? So we need, even as South Africa, as we are a country, as Zimbabwe, as other countries that want to build their economies on minerals. It's not sustainable in the long term. You open up a mine, they tell you only have 15 years to mine, 20 years to mine, and you are done. We needed to start building businesses that actually are replaceable, whose resources can be duplicated. Hence, industries such as agriculture, for example, are much more sustainable. Industries that have to do with working with resources. If you cut a tree, you can plant another one. Furniture and etc. are much more replaceable, where you can actually replenish those resources. But for us to major in business, and human beings are the greatest resource, because you can give birth to some and train them and educate them and make some more. When others die, others are being born. That's a sustainable business. So we cannot begin to talk about African businesses which are actually founded on irreplaceable resources. For we are just turning Africa into a junkyard. I went to Kimberley the other day, and my tummy was turned upside down. I had to pay about $150 to enter a certain place. They call it one of the biggest halls that was dug by human beings, by human hands.
So just to go in there, you had to pay $150.
I had to pay $150. Then you go into that hall. What there's nothing to see there. It's just a hall. Okay, it's a tourist attraction now. And I stood there, and I put my mind in the thousands of people who worked in this hall. One question flew past my mind. What happened to the diamonds that left
this place,
this hall? Africa is left with a trophy of a hall. One of the biggest man-made halls. So are we saying that this is the Africa we're going to be having? Gold Reef City is now a tourist attraction. Get yourself a lift, go down there and see how they used to dig and take the gold out. So we are left with an amusement center. We are left with, and you must pay to go and see that. You must pay to go and see the abuse that happened on your own land. You still must pay for it to go and see how you were vandalized as a country. My understanding is slightly different. We need to move away the African economy from ecological madness, where industries are happening in Africa and they're destroying the habitat. We need, as Africans, to be selfish. I got a deal the other day. Someone called me. They want to buy mercury. Want to buy mercury for what? No, I want to go to Congo.
Okay.
And do what? And I want to go and clean some gold. I said, but mercury is no longer allowed. It's a way of cleaning up gold. No, if you don't want it, I'll get it from someone else. So they still bought it and smuggled it through all the borders, because borders are corrupt. You go to Congo and wash up your gold, wash the mercury into the rivers, and manage the chaos of the cyanide and the mercury that it is doing down the Congo River, from fisheries to vegetation to human beings. And it's happening in the nostrils of the governments.
Now, what type and quality of human resources that we need to underpin our development aspirations as the African continent?
We needed to start looking at the authentic African educational systems that build for us truthful Africans with a good concept of Ubuntu, as I said at the beginning. People with great respect for themselves, for their community, and for the African continent at large. People who understand ethnic connections between tribes and nations, so that we can begin to work together and come together as a collective. People who begin to expand our horizons of influence and prioritize, I say it again, prioritize the African agenda. African lives matter, and it should matter to the religious organizations. It should matter to the economic organizations. It should matter to the political organizations.
And then, how could we ensure that, in as much as the leadership, like you said, we have a deficiency of leadership? You were quoting the words of Professor Lumumba there. You spoke about the deficiency of leadership, but then how do we focus on good economic management as Africans?
When people own their own things, management is secondary. My definition of corruption is when two people are talking about money that belongs to a third party. Corruption is rife. People struggle with management because they are managing other people's resources. True wealth, therefore, it is family wealth. Every person out there have your 2 cows, your 4 goats, your 5 sheep, 15 chickens, and your homestead. Things that you own. Can you tell me about management? When you own your things, you are a Zulu man.
Yeah.
You will know how to put a kraal.
Yeah.
You will know how to put a fence. You will. Why? Because these things are whose things?
They're mine.
Good.
They're mine.
So when you talk about management, the first definition you must understand, people are reckless because they are not managing
their own.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, well, that's quite interesting. But then I should just take us a little bit somewhere further now. If you look at China, their surging interest in Africa. You've got Jack Ma, the billionaire, on the other side, also donating funds, drugs for the COVID-19 specifically, and it's in all over the countries in Africa. And also the results came that immediately after he made those donations, the cases dropped. There were no, some sort of, the number rather, on daily basis, they dropped. The interest of these people from outside of the continent coming inside with funds and then using the word we are donating and helping Africa. How do we view that?
I will answer you as an African. And listen to me very carefully. There's no man who keeps a chicken as a pet with no intentions of eating it. We keep chickens. Why? For food.
For food, yeah.
Yeah. So you cannot keep a chicken as a pet. And on a more lighter note, there's no boy who can have a girlfriend just as a girlfriend and with no intentions of eating the chicken. So when you talk about donations, we need to understand them in the truest sense. You walk up into America, I've been to Brooklyn, I've been to New York City and other places, I've been to London, I've been to Brixton and other places, and you look at the amount of poverty that is in those cities, drugs that are being used in those cities, the crime rates that are in those cities. The advantage is that they don't announce and shout on their own poverty as Africans do, but they have dilapidated houses. People are living in bridges and etc. with poverty. In a country that has that amount of poverty, on their nostrils, wake up in the morning and say, we are going to be donating to the poor in Africa. What is the moral of the story? That you cannot look after your own country and your own citizens, who are also in the same poverty, if not worse. And you have an interest. In Shona, there's a proverb that says, "Kupukuta mwana wemvana madziuha." Like when you see a woman who is far from you and she has no husband and you are a husband on the other side and then you go looking for a piece of tissue paper to come and wipe the nose of the child and you go to lengths to look for the tissue to wipe the nose. What are your interests in the mother? Are you following? Are you following? It does not mean you must not care for the child, but it is said in a sarcastic way that you will not have an interest in looking after the baby so well.
When you don't have other intentions for the mother.
Because the issue is that while you are doing this, how is the mother reacting to what you are doing?
Well, I catch you right there. But then here's the thing also: if you have all that, we are looking at the fact that these things are affecting the continent of Africa. These donations, they're indebting the continent. Now, how should we
change the word?
Yeah, okay.
Leaders are selling Africans.
Okay, leaders are selling the continent.
Yes.
All right, now, how should, because I think a lot of people in the continent of Africa, they are still asleep. They're not awake to the reality of what's happening exactly with this. They're praising these Europeans. How should we view, what should be our thinking in approaching or in coming into reality that these people are bringing towards us?
Mine is an alarm that I need to sound very loudly. We have just gone through the last century fighting the colonialists from the north and from the west. And if we are not careful, just when we thought we were beginning to put our story together as African leaders, China is coming with a totally different ball game to send us back again. And I can guarantee you it took 400 years to undo what the colonialists had done. If we don't make right decisions now, let us know we have another 400 years. We have another 800 years of Africans struggling with colonialism. So we may as well just give up life and know that we are going to be slaves forever. But however, as long as I'm still alive, you need to put a bullet in my head to make me shut up. For I believe that I cannot bear my children to become slaves of another man.
Well, on that note, Bishop, we should just take a very quick short break here, but I did take note of this. You cannot take care of the child if you have no intentions on how the mother reacts. This is Sankofa. We'll be back just right after this. Stay tuned.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on StarSat. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
Experience the extraordinary.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Have you lost it? Move!
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
Challenge your ordinary.
Why don't you start a dance class?
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
Very good morning and a warm welcome to Galaxy News. My name is and this is Pan-African Morning. Of course, I'm not going alone. I'm going with my co-host, the one and only, the Pan-African woman, How are you, my darling?
I'm wonderful, Mpumalanga. Yes, welcome to the Pan-African Morning right here on Galaxy Universal Network.
Galaxy Universal Network is a company owned by 5 directors. As I have said, the CEO is led by our able woman, and we are black-owned company. And as such, part of our mission, vision, sacrifice, and choices is to conquer the African continent. By that I mean from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Algeria, Kenya, Tanzania, from Cape to Cairo, my sister. However, part of our plan and our mission is to provoke the mindsets and the hearts of the African people by telling untold stories in an authentic way, in an unbiased way, in a way that has never been told before.
I think the most important thing in life is about growth. From where you were, I always tell young people that we must compete with our yesterday. And I got to present I had said, okay, right now they have sentenced me to effective 7 years. So what next? What am I going to do with my time? And I remember telling one of my very good friends, close friend, Nathan Marara, I said to him, you know, when I leave this place, I'm going straight to a man that sentenced me. He was taken aback. He couldn't understand. Why would you go back to a man? Of course, he thought good not I wanted to harm this man. I said, it's because that man changed my life. So there's something that's called time. When I'm talking to young people, we must always redeem the time. I no longer live in times, but I live in moments because I understand what the freedom means. So because of the wrong decision that I've made one day, I was told I'm in the most hopeless of places, which was the present. I had to start building all over again.
A very warm welcome once again. It is still a Sankofa. We're looking at the past, analyzing the present, and giving you the perspective on how could the future look like. Well, I'm still with the man here, Bishop. Here we are. Just for us, before we jump into our next segment here, I want to look at something. If you look at, there's a continuous of the Western influence in African countries. There is a dependence. Let me say, African countries, they are fully dependent on the Western in many ways. Now, what sustains the economic dependence on Western countries?
It's abuse and lack of unity on the African continent. And I think in the short term, it looks like it's a bad for business to get rid of the colonizer. But in the long term, it is the best decision. Because you cannot be selling cocoa at $100 a barrel to Europe, and it comes back and it's costing you 10,000 rand. The same thing when it's converted into chocolate and etc. Our sugar cane, for example, our coal and our minerals, as I've already said. We cannot even talk about human resource, the amount of brain drain that has happened towards the West. When they come back in their coffins. Africa is good for burial of the African people because apparently we're just good for giving things in their raw form, and those that can beneficiate them then must come back to us. And then you call that dependence. Can you think through that? So we are actually supplying the chocolate market in Europe because we are supplying the cocoa. And then you say we have a dependence on the European system. We depend on the final products. But when it comes to the raw materials, we are the ones producing the raw materials. Hence, we are challenging African presidents and leadership that we need to start thinking about Africans first by establishing and creating factories and industries that beneficiate our raw material so that our participation on the world market can actually be an equal partner. But by no ways do we depend on Western market.
Well, on that note, once again, we should just comment that we have, of course, our viewers there putting on some comments on our social media platforms on Facebook. We can see that. But just in short, we just want to take a look at those and respond. I have the Bishop here with me. If you could, maybe Bishop, take us through as to what exactly is happening there and respond to those comments just in short.
I left my glasses at home. So I thought maybe ask one of the guys there just to help you quickly and maybe get speak my brother, that is from Valton Allen. Speak my brother, we need a re-education of the African people. We have a comment here from Makweta, Africans, let's not stop being ignorant. And Eric Msebele, most African leaders are rude and illiterate. I do agree with that. Great morning we're having here. We love you very much. That's from Oluchi, Osumuwoke. That sounds like Nigerian there. And the Fish Road in Namibia is in the house. Yo, power. That is Tatsi from Tsamai. Power, that pipe tragedy, the pipe we spoke about from Nigeria, that actually saying that's also a big problem. That's Comrade Motimele Tabo. Bishop, I think you must contest to be for the next election to be the president. The Constitutional Court has made it possible.
What is your response to that?
I'm a citizen, you know.
All right.
But maybe, I don't know, he's talking president of what, you know. So
maybe of the African continent, you know,
maybe
most likely.
We can have that conversation another day. These are facts that we are learning. Our curriculums have become useless. We want to learn more about the Africans. Speak, my brother, that's from Velton Allen. My brother, speak. We need a re-education of the African people. And hello, sir. That's from Vincent. He's just greeting us there. We will need an intense spiritual security and not to end up like the great Lumumba in Congo. Oh, this many Lombe is saying, I need to be protected. At least some people will decide to kill me. Yeah, I have always questioned those cosmetics from Europe and how the African culture has been abused. Our children will even laugh at you, and when you go to school on the basis of table manners, because you have not been taught the manners associated with the Western ways of life. This one's an interesting one. That's from Tabo there. Chinyembeko from Piri is just responding. That is also a Piri. That is from Malawi. I'm Piri also, but from Zimbabwe. Yeah. Awesome. Good show. Excellent disruptive suggestions. But how and when do we engage these concepts which are not new, but our leadership is lacking? And I think we need to start seeing how do we convert our leadership and our political leaders and informing them, if not removing them. Remove them and replace them with, bring your leaders and let's teach them.
Just in short, Bishop, there's somebody there also on the comments who says they would like to see you with Professor Patrick Lumumba, maybe at some point on the studio. And I know he's a busy man, he's all over, he's just been pushing his work also. How much are the chances? I mean, if he could maybe take a look, also have him to say this, maybe he would like to be part of it.
It's your call. You are a man of power. You have the phones in your hands. Make contact. I'm available. I don't have any reservations.
No, we should look into that, of course. We'll try as time goes and see how it works. But that's what our social media has been saying.
It's lots. I can't finish it. It's a whole world of response. But I think that we must thank them for responding and coming in on board, and they're watching.
Indeed. Well, now, Bishop, just to jump on now, we have the thoughts, tools.
Yeah, the last part of this session, I want us to look at this thinking tool. In the olden days, our parents used to walk around with knob carries, and I happen to find myself one also. And maybe within it, we need to unpack this so that we can actually do the rewiring of the African thinking pattern.
Yeah.
And I designed this thought pattern, and I placed it in this thinking tool. Then this side, I want to consider this as your brains. This becomes your mind. So when an old man is walking, he needed support. And this gave him the external support base. So an old man walks with three things next to him. It's his shadow, which is his reflection. It's him, which is his body. And it is his knob carry, which is his reflection,
Can we go
his support.
to the original name of this? Because I think knob
Shimbo.
Shimbo. In Zulu we call it Isagila or Noma Iwisa.
Iwisa, something that makes something drop. So I've designed this one to say, let this part here represent your brains. And I'm talking to you as Africans. This becomes your brain. And your brain, you divide it into three sections. What is the past looking like? First section. What is the present looking like? Second section. What is the future looking like? I did this thinking tool on my program, Farmers of Thought. And I want every African man must actually have a Sagila. Every African woman must have this. This will assist us.
But won't that maybe contributing to violence? I mean, people fight a lot and then you get...
They had them in the past. Were they violent?
But, I mean, I think those of the past, it was people...
Let's think together first. They carry guns. You don't even have anything. So stop there. You're not ready for what you're saying. This represents the past. This represents the present. This represents the future. So historical information, contemporary information, future information. That gives you the three divisions. So the divisions here are for time. When you are making a decision, you pass it through the time framework. Number two, then you come here, which represent the African concept, Ubuntu, the Eastern concept, which is the Chinese, the Western concept, and the Northern concept. When you are thinking through, then you already have 7 questions that you're asking on the thinking tool. What is the time frame? How does this affect me spiritually? How does this affect me mentally? How does this affect me economically? How does this affect me socially? As Africans, therefore, when we are passing our decisions, we must consider Africans as a priority. And the first question we must ask in all our policies, how does this speak to our Ubuntu nation as Africans? Right now, the African leaders are thinking like this. They're thinking from the West. What are the Americans and the Europeans going to say? What kind of machinery are we going to be needing here? What education are we going to be needing? And finally, how is the African going to be responding to this? This is not a good way of thinking. The correct way of thinking must be this way, as African leaders. We consider ourselves as priority. Ubuntu becomes the first bus stop of our conversation. After Ubuntu, what and how do we relate with the Chinese community, which becomes the Eastern concepts of thinking? Thirdly, what kind of machinery and finances do we need to be dealing with this? Ultimately, how do we socialize and interact with other communities that are out there?
Yeah.
You take marriage, you pass it through this stick. You want to get married? Right. Ubuntu, how does that speak? Spiritually, how does that speak? Socially, how does that speak? Economically, how does that speak? Mentally, how does that speak? In other words, before you get married, therefore, you want to be thinking as, what does that mean in terms of your culture? Do you have enough mental power to be dealing with your decision? Do you have enough economic power to be dealing with what you want to do right now? Ultimately, how is this marriage going to affect you in terms of the social space? You begin to process this stick as you walk around with it, to process your money, your economics, to process your politics, to process your medicines, and to process your religions. Because unless you have a format of thinking, and some of you guys who are out there who are students in class, this is how you begin to be asking correct questions so that you can get correct answers. So right, let's take China as Africa. How do we relate as China in terms of our Ubuntu? Does the Chinese way of thinking relate to our Ubuntu?
That's the biggest question.
Are you with me? First question. Second question, do we have enough mental power to be dealing with the Chinese people? Thirdly, do we have economic muscle to be challenging what the Chinese people are doing? Ultimately, how are we transforming our communities because of the arrival of the Chinese?
Which will then take us back to the story that you shared earlier on about Zambia being a population of 7 million people dealing against the whole continent of China.
Correct.
That's how they're going to be struggling. They're surely going to succumb to that because it's the majority against the minority now.
So those of you who are in the religious space, for example, you'll be saying spiritual growth, mental growth, spiritual, mental, social, and what is that? What the third one? In body, in mind, in body, physical, mental, spiritual, and economic. Then you constantly pass your ideas through the thinking tool, so that in the midst of you making a decision, when you are being asked questions in class, constantly you want to be asking those complicated, difficult questions. You can even take Jesus and put him here. Some of you are Christians, it's Sunday. This Jesus story. Question number one, is he African?
Does he have to be African?
I'm just saying we are thinking. The world of thinking has no limitation. Or maybe there's a good question, must he not be African?
Well, for another day. We'll discuss.
You are not ready. You don't start with me.
I was just passing.
Is he African?
Yep.
First question. And if he is not African, why? How does Jesus address our Ubuntu? Does he teach us to become human beings, and become Abantu? And what kind of people does Jesus want us to become? Second question, what does this Jesus story do to our mental framework? When the imagery around him is all white, how does it affect us as Africans? What does Jesus call from us economically to sponsor this idea of this Jesus? How much does it cost me to believe this story? Ultimately, how do I interact with the community now that I've believed in this guy called Jesus? What was he in the past? What has he become in the present? What will he be in the future? So this you can just play around with it. For me, so every time you see me when you are talking and I'm rubbing my stick and etc., I'm actually processing your thoughts and say, when you're asking me a thought, at what level am I going to be answering you? Am I going to be answering you at a social level? Am I answering you at a mental level? Am I or economic level? Am I dealing with you at a spiritual level?
That's quite very interesting, because for many years I've been thinking that, in the olden days I thought this was used just to instill discipline when kids are losing it, like especially when you're going to Ewalusi and Nkomen would go to the pastures. But now I'm getting something else. But on that note, Bishop, I just want us to take a very quick short break, and then we're going to be able to come back and continue here as we just embarked now once again on the subject of thinking tools that are significant, that will be also helpful for us as Africans. We're just going to take a very quick short break. This is still the Sankofa. It is Petros Msweli with the Bishop Joshua Maponga III. We will be back just right after this. Don't go anywhere.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home. They must not be traveling unnecessary.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here.
Reporting for Galaxy TV News.
Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network.
abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho
bila woga upendeleo hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on StarSat. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
A very warm welcome back to Galaxy News. Once again, we're still here on Sankofa. We're looking back at the history, but then analyzing the current situation, then also, of course, trying to analyze and check how could the future look like. Well, it's been a long 2 hours, which I believe that people in Namibia, Tanzania, Nigeria, South Sudan, Mozambique, Zimbabwe also are watching. They're with us. I can see on the social media platforms there. You got people who are, of course, having their views. Keep them coming. The conversation continues, of course. But then I'm still with the Bishop here. Bishop, we've gone. It's been a long journey. Thinking tools. On top of that, the Sakila, the Nobkiri.
Yes.
I can't believe it. Every African man, woman must have it.
Must have this.
It will shape
when
you.
When you are sitting in the crawl, you must be holding it.
Yeah.
When you are having conversations, you must be holding it. When you are discussing issues of crime in a community, when you are talking to your children, you must be having it.
So it will serve as a hard drive.
This actually becomes this is a hard drive of information.
Yeah. You can put it that
so
way.
if as a man and as a woman, you sit around with it and really begin to process your thoughts and place them in and think into it, it actually comes in handy. So that by the time you're walking through life, you have a point of reference.
It's quite interesting that if you look at the Western ways of doing it, they'll tell you to have a journal. You should have some sort of written down. I think this is our
This is my journal.
The formula we can use for your thinking. It does very good. But then, Bishop, still on the matter of talking about the thinking tools. What more do you have? Because I'm sure you have a lot. We've been talking about this long time.
I think towards the last part of this conversation, would rather pitch it up slightly higher in terms of discussing the aim concept, the African indigenous movement concept that we have, and how that organization is now gathering its muscle together to begin to take the conversation to a higher level.
Yes.
We have designed what we call the 7 pillars.
Okay.
The 7 pillars of aim.
Yeah.
Now, when you take the 7 pillars of aim, then you take one pillar and you put it here and you process it through.
Yeah.
You're following?
Yeah, I'm getting it.
Then the 7 pillars later, you actually must have 7 pillars here.
Okay.
With their questions.
Yeah.
This becomes a library now.
Yeah, on its own.
It's
yeah.
no longer so we've come up with the 7 pillars of aim. Pillar number 1, which is governance.
Yeah.
Pillar of governance. That if Africa must change, we're talking the future now. If Africa must change the way it is doing its governance. We cannot be cutting and pasting policies from other countries on how to run our own African continent. It has not worked. It will not work. We need to incorporate indigenous governance systems into the greater space of African management so that we can actually appreciate from that. Number 2, Africa needs to understand again, number 2, which is the educational pillar. So you take governance, just to take you one. Governance, African. What was it in the past? What is it in the present? What is it in the future? Governance. And we come to number 1, spiritually or Ubuntu, how does that relate to us as governance, for example? Our mental preparation for that governance system. What sort of money and systems do we need to put in place to deal with that? And how will that governance system relate with the rest of the world? So you actually process the thought on governance on the same stick again. Then you bring education. Education right here. How was it in the past? How is it in the present? How is it in the future? And education was oral. Now it is based on books. In the future, it's based on e-education.
Yeah, it's e-education.
So you begin to see the progress right there. Then you ask again, does this education develop us physically? Does it develop us spiritually? Does it develop us mentally? And what type of people are we making with this education on a social platform? I think this now summarizes when you hear me talking earlier on, and I'm speaking the things I'm speaking, that our education system and our politics is not relating to the community that we're living in. Because by the time people have gone through the education system, no longer find themselves relevant to the same community that brought them up.
Yes,
and thirdly, you're talking about the commerce, commerce, which is the business. What you're talking about. You know, as Africans again, what was our business in the past, in our commerce? What is it in the present? What will it be in the future? And this business that we are doing, how is it affecting us spiritually again? How are we relating with the Chinese community? How are we relating with the American community? How are we relating with the European community?
So just to get into that, Bishop, I want to view it this way, to say you have developed this organization, it is a movement. What is your the target? What exactly it is that you want to achieve with it? As an organization being given to people, to have that library whereby you're giving information to people. What is your main aim with the organization?
Actually, you have just said what is your main aim. You have just said it. The aim is AIM, African Indigenous Movement. We're interested in developing the software of the African children, the African population, to say, can we just start thinking differently? So that by the time we're engaging on politics, on economics and on education, the quality of our engagement is not photocopying and duplicating and re-emphasizing Eurocentric frames of thinking. We needed Africans to have their own thinking tool. We need our thinking tool. And it's my donation to the whole of the African continent. If all the 2.6 billion people in Africa can begin to think in this direction, I think we can begin to develop a new community altogether.
So things might most likely take a new direction just because it all begins up in the mind. It has to be the thinking first.
The software controls the hardware.
I don't think everybody saw that, but it's okay. We're just going to leave it that way. Now, I'm looking at the fact that you are at this point whereby it is digital for now. Are there any hard copies that you're using to take this information and distribute it out to the people there?
We're running classes on my Facebook page, on Farmers of Thought, every afternoon at 4:15, where we're actually taking through nations. We have thousands of people right now on that page who are going through this process. And it's my desire that even from this platform, we develop thinkers. And the people are going to be interviewing going forward. When I finally come and I sit on your chair to be running the show and you are assisting me, it will be said we will process all thoughts through that. So I just given you the first 3, which was the governance, which is the education and the business. Number 4 becomes the agriculture. How do we deal with our agriculture again? We pass our agricultural system on the same tool. After agriculture, then we are looking at cultural reform. You know,
Let's just, I want to go into something, Bishop, which is very interesting that it just came to me. If you look at the agriculture system in the African continent, why is it that do we struggle to do and follow, not to follow, but maybe to say use, if you look at the routine that is followed by the Americans in the agriculture system, because for an example, you have Brazil supplying us with chickens from America. They're bringing chickens in South Africa specifically. Yet we have a lot of poultry farming in the country. But what's the struggle there? Why is it not us giving them chickens, for that matter?
You want the truth or you want lies?
I want the truth.
Are you sure they're selling you chickens?
Okay, if it's not chickens, what is it?
Then you need to ask them. Because it doesn't mean that we have failed to supply our own chickens. Why must we be eating Brazilian chickens as if we cannot supply our own chickens?
What's the story behind?
That's what you must find out. I don't want to be caught in a conspiracy.
Okay, it's conspiracy.
I don't want to be caught up in a conspiracy. But why would you supply someone with chickens who
When
actually is producing their own chickens? What is their interest? Are these real chickens?
That's quite
Are these real
interesting.
chickens?
It's quite interesting.
Is it possible there's some biological management that we're doing? Is it possible that we're being managed somehow? Is there a business deal that we don't know?
Yeah.
Because rainbow chickens and all other African chickens, we have enough in South Africa.
Indeed.
So you tell me. Maybe you go and do a research. Maybe you go and do a research and say, why are we buying chickens from Brazil when we are able to supply our own chickens?
Quite true. But then also you spoke about the pillar which has to do with culture, which it's very important the way I see it and the way I view it myself as an African, to say culture is important. Because if you look at the way we are too Western, let me just spell it out there. We are too Western in many ways. It be in the way we socialize, the way we conduct ourselves in a way. Recently we had a conversation off air, remember, when we spoke about even the way we dress, our fashion sense as Africans. Which are the subjects that are hardly being discussed out there because people are afraid of touching the nerves of other people? Like, if we could just a little bit expand on that, looking at the culture.
Culture is our DNA. Culture is our roots. Culture is where we come from. A tree, when you cut off the roots, you have destroyed that tree. So until we begin to learn to understand the connection of the tree and the fruits to the roots, you may never be able to appreciate where you are coming from. The concept of Sankofa is based on culture. But let's look back. And I want to say this, and I'll keep on saying it. Until we know who we are, until we know where we are coming from, until we put our roots and we water them, and we look after them, the tree will dry up on the top side. And when we don't understand and appreciate the value of the roots, and you only want to enjoy our fruits. Right now what we are seeing in terms of what we look at, these are the fruits of a dried up tree. But if we begin to water our roots, we may begin to produce a different quality of product that can deal with the world.
Well, just you've mentioned only, I think it's been 6 pillars. We have one more to do. But before we go to that one, I just want us to quickly go to a very short break. But then after the break, the conversations continue rather here on the Sankofa. It is Bishop Joshua Maponga III with I, Petros Msweli. We're looking back on what happened in history, thus analyzing the current situation and also just giving a little bit of how could the future look like. Don't go anywhere. We're still here. We'll be right back after the break. This is Sankofa.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home. They must not be traveling unnecessarily.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here.
Reporting for Galaxy TV News.
Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, You will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network. Khelelisisa ditaba tse felletseng.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on StarSat. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
A very warm welcome back. You are still with us here on Galaxy TV. It is Sankofa. We're rebooting the African software. That's what we've been doing for the past 2 hours. We are on the final hour. Of course, we did look at it on the perspective of politics. We went on to go with economics. But then now Bishop took me on the thinking tools. Upete, somebody said on the social media, they also call it Indodo. I don't know where is that from, but they say they call it Indodo in their country. So here we have it. Now on the last pillar there, Bishop, which I think you didn't mention, if you could give us there, what do you have on the last one there?
So the pillars, we said number one is governance. And after governance, we have education. After education, we have commerce and business. After commerce and business, we have agriculture. After agriculture, we have culture. You know, and after culture, I designed another one called the religious and spirituality pillar.
That's the seventh one.
No, sixth.
Sixth one, yeah.
Which is key to an African.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to dwell a little bit on that, if you could.
Then the last one now is the ecological, and which I also want to call the technological. That all technologies must always be speaking to environment. So our seventh pillar of aim actually focuses at how do you develop businesses and technologies that are actually user-friendly to the environment.
Now, before we just can maybe go on that seventh one, because I think it's also very interesting, just to give us a touch-up, because we will also dwell in them as time goes in the upcoming weeks. But I just want us to go back to the religious one first. When we speak of religious and spirituality, I would say also, without fear or anything, that there's so much confusion in the African way of dealing with religion and like spirituality. What do you have for us that I think it could be an eye-opener to somebody out there who has been fed something that has made them to forget who they are, to lose the sense of themselves and their background as an African?
I like what you're doing, but because I'm here with you, we may as well just work on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then what do we do? Now you work with me now. This is your turn. So we are discussing religion today.
Yes.
Ask the question.
How does it impact me as an African?
No. We're dealing with the time frames first.
Time frames, okay.
Yeah, so number one.
What happened in the past is history.
So say something about that.
Okay, in the basis of religion.
On basis of religion.
When we talk about African in the African context.
Yes.
Okay, if that would be the case, well, we are Africans. I mean, we are coming from a background of having to do, spirituality was based mainly on our forefathers.
Good. And
in the present.
In the present?
Well, I don't know what happened there in between that.
There's a transition.
Transition, yes.
There's a transition.
Because now, at the moment, we grew up now being introduced in, it was not an introduction, rather, I would say, it is some sort of a confusion. You don't know which one to take. There are two things coming up, two or three more, or more coming up to
a little bit of this.
And a little bit of this. The Western.
Yes.
And so that's how we have now, it's up to about a decision or choice making. What's going to happen in the future? I think that now comes on the discussion that we're having in this chair to say what might happen if somebody is on the situation whereby I have a little bit of a background, transition, I'm introduced to the western part of it, and then I'm in confusion.
Okay.
What does future
While
hold
you are
for me?
doubting what the future looks like, in the contemporary, why is Europe right now not Christian? Their churches have now been turned into libraries. Africa is now where Europe used to be 100 years ago. So if you are looking at Africa, reading from the history of Europe, do you think that the churches which we have now will be relevant in the future when Europe's churches are no longer relevant?
If you look, like you say, if we look at the background, the history of it, the possibilities of having those churches now to be relevant, I think the chances are very slim.
Very slim.
Very slim.
So yeah, now your brains are working. We are working. And now when you come again to the religious issues and spirituality, the question is, what is African spirituality?
Well, with African spirituality, it's more, it doesn't need even that much to say, you know, go research and so forth. It's what we know. We grow up with it.
That's it.
We are being taught it. It comes to us in a silver plate to say, this is who you are. And then you, by volitionally, I put it that way, you choose to take another direction.
That's it. Mentally, what type of preparation would you do to participate in African spirituality?
One of the things that I believe is very key, in a way, you need to firstly get rid of the garbage that we get fed along the way without having to thoroughly inspect and find out what is the agenda behind, what is the purpose being pushed, what do we need, why is this being introduced to us first?
Number 3, the present form of Christianity and spirituality. How much is it costing the African?
It's quite a lot, for that matter.
And think outside of the box. I mean, don't worry about your church story. Just let your mind go. Right now, we have already spoken about the African.
Yes.
He needs nothing. You can just make it worship in nature. Presently, what does it cost for you?
Well, let me just put it this way, Bishop. It is without a doubt, if you look at the church at the present age, it is stealing from the very same indigent people, because people are being pushed to give offerings in the church. The very same poor people, they're giving this one rich man, whom to me now comes to appear as what they call it con men, because they're driving private jets, they got expensive luxury cars, yet they are taking money from the people who go to bed without food.
Wow.
Is that the purpose of the church?
I could not have said it better. And lastly, what quality of a community are we developing with churches in terms of their relationship with the communities that they're living, and the Africans and the indigenous people and culture? When you look at now Christianity as we are practicing it, what quality and type of communities are these churches building?
We have ignorant church people. We have indigent, impecunious church people. We have lost people who do not know where they are going and where they're coming from.
Is this modern way of spirituality building the society or dividing it?
Dividing it and taking it straight to the graveside. If I can put it that way, that's how we have it.
This being your first time, I didn't even prepare you in terms of giving you information on what to say. But it would be simply because you are asking the right questions. Along the thing, you actually find that. Therefore, my comment to the great African people is, we are always looking for information, and we think that we need to. So where are the books that you have written? Where can I find you? Where is this information? No, maybe actually the information, you have it. It's just that maybe you have not processed it and put yourself into context so that you can begin to deal with issues
and have the right questions
and correctly. And therefore, finally, when you say, as an African, when you're supposed to deal with your spirituality, and it becomes a weapon.
I also had somebody online, I think it was on the show that we did last week, somebody was asking as to these type of thoughts, such information, such library. They were asking about the availability of the material in which they could process them. Maybe in short, just if you could just give more as to how could people get access to information apart from the digital platforms. I'm sure hard copies and so forth.
I've written some few books.
Yes.
But they are not the alpha and omega of what is out there. There are lots of books. I have some pages on my Telegram, a library that I've created there, Farmers of Thought, FOT Reading Club, which actually is more than 200-300 books that I've uploaded there. But over and above that, I'm not here to be selling books. I'm here to be selling an idea that over and above the information that you are looking for from externals, we needed to start finding a way of how do we convert our oral traditions into education. And for the African, particularly for some of us who have started taking these things seriously, you look at our art, you look at our fashion, you look at our artifacts. Inside all these things is embedded knowledge. This is a library of understanding. You can come around and teach about chakras, teaching about diet and foods, the blue foods, the white foods, how do you eat, what are the shapes on these things, and you find that the white, all ancient people, had they not accepted the teachings of the whites of demonizing everything. This is all technologies. These are technologies. These are libraries of information. This is Xhosa. And if you can go back and say, why the colors of blue and white, why the shapes, why what are they trying to communicate, what was the difference between this and the Hebrew flag of the Jews, why the Xhosa are circumcising just like the Jews are circumcising. Is it possible that the Jews and the Xhosas actually share a common ancestry?
That's quite interesting.
So you look at it, is this not Jewish? And you find that when you study culture and you appreciate and you understand it, you may actually find that it has a DNA of critical historical information that our present libraries would always be keeping away from it, because they want to write that history as a European history, as contrasted to our own indigenous knowledge systems.
So the thinking tools that you're currently developing and trying to get to people out there, for people. In fact, I like it because we are not forcing anybody to eat, to digest this stuff. It's rather say, here is the material, will you use it? It's a matter of choice also. But then now I'm looking at those as to say they might help to develop the mindset of everybody out there, of somebody who is, we normally call them Mama 2000. Those young kids who grow up in front of a television and the television tells them history portrayed in a Western way of it, to say this is your forefathers, the leaders. They were ruthless people. They're people who were killing people. Nothing good being said about them. It's always portraying them as the people who are horrible. I mean, with that being said, reaching out to those young people.
I want to reach out to the young people. And tell the young people out there, you are not dull. You are not stupid. It's just that the way they are teaching you cannot help you to remember and process the information that you have.
So it's the system of education.
If you are a student, I want to challenge every student to actually come up with a thinking tool of this nature. And before you write your examination, have a piece of paper on the side and draw the thinking tool. And as you are answering questions, draw your answers from the thinking tool. If you are doing history, geography, literature, analysis, anything, business, economics, and etc., and you are sitting in an examination, and the teacher is asking you, he's only asking you one question. You should be able to give him 4 different answers with 3 different frames of time frames. You are able to look at the world through the African eye, look at the world through the Chinese eye, look at the world through the American eye, look at the world through the European eye, and process it. But in the past it was like this, in the present it is like this, in the future it will be like this. You'll be shocked that your teacher would not know how to mark your paper because he asked you one question
and then you
gave him 7 answers. So when they ask you what was this and this, you say, okay, answer number 1 according to the history. It was like this. According to the present. According to the future. And then you break down the answers and say, please, may I have more paper? Then you educate your teachers because they are also ignorant. They also don't know. So this is not just for me an entertainment, but I'm discovering that many of our young people out there are frustrated. They are struggling in school and they are failing because they say they don't understand what is being taught. But you're not stupid. You're not dull. It's just that your teachers are dull. And the way they are teaching you is not the way you understand. So design for yourself simple thinking tool. And for parents, have your thinking tools. When you are talking to your children, husbands and wives, have your thinking tools. Process your ideas. We want to buy a new house. Okay. What does it mean? We are going to make a child. Okay. What does it mean? Constantly have a cycle of intelligent questions that you ask around the thinking tool until you are able to actually have this thinking tool no longer in the physical space, but it is actually in your mind, and you can process your thoughts and engage systems vigorously so, and respond to them as an African.
Well, Bishop, on that note, let's just take a very quick short break here. It is Sankofa, as we're going to be coming back with the last segment of the show. We're still here with Bishop. We are talking on the basis of rather rebooting the software of the Africans. This is Sankofa here on Galaxy TV. We'll be right back after this.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home. They must not be traveling unnecessarily.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here.
Reporting for Galaxy TV News.
Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network. Khilikisa ditaba tse felletseng.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on StarSat. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
A very warm welcome back once again. This is Sankofa on Galaxy TV. It is Petros Msweli with Bishop Joshua Maponga III. We've been looking at the subject on rebooting the software of Africans. We're talking about what happened in the history of politics, what happened in economics, what is happening at the moment. Thinking tools that have been introduced to us. The Bishop spoke to us about the pillars, 7 of them, than which I believe that as of next week, we're embarking on the journey whereby we're going to tackle each and every pillar. Just to give us a glimpse rather before we just wrap it up all here, what should we expect on the next week's show? What are we having? What are the lines? What are we going to be looking at?
Next week we start to implement the thought patterns. Remember, we're talking to the African continent, and we are dealing with the disillusioned people, disappointed people, people who voted and demonstrated, fought for liberation, but the system that they fought for is no longer giving them what they fought for. We are doing a rebooting, recalibration of the thinking patterns of the Africans. And the first pillar we're going to be looking at next week is the pillar of governance. How are we ruling Africa? How must Africa be ruled? How will Africa look like in the future? What sort of indigenous governance systems can we put in place? How do these indigenous governance systems relate to the democratic governance systems that we have been incorporating in our world. When we change the African governance system, what will change in the communities that we are living? So basically, we are looking at the rule of law, both in the ancient times, in the present times, and into the future. How do we manipulate instruments of law into an advantage for the African people?
Now, it's just interesting for me. Somebody will say, well, you guys are very bold. You want to take on the governance and the rule of law. But why is it significant that people get some more clarity on how the law rules and how will that affect them? What will be the end result, the governing of their life, right? How is it? Why is it important?
There's nothing scary about discussing that. Animal worlds have rules. Land have rules. Rainfall has rules. Water has rules. Gravity has rules. We live in an environment where there is an amount of management that runs in. And for the African to wait and say only the European will tell me to govern myself, I think that's being irresponsible. So we're basically looking into the past where we are coming from and understand how we used to run things in the past and how has that past been eroded into this new paradigm we're now living in. Is this the future that we want to see our children living in?
In some of the things that maybe you will touch on, do you have anything that comes quickly in mind to say this, what you might like to question a little bit? Because I'm sure we're going to be having a law expert, of course, on the show with us. Just
I want to question the issue of presidents versus kings. And who says presidents, what are presidents? And what are kings? What is the ancient value of having a leader who is attached to the land? And the spirituality of the land? Does politics answer spiritual questions? Or we end up with presidents who have not been introduced to the land itself? Is it possible that we're actually having trophies of power who don't have spiritual understanding?
It's quite good in the inside, because what I'm thinking, just to give also acknowledgement there to our viewers who are in Nigeria. We're getting some people telling us they're watching from Lagos. You got people from Zambia, they're watching there. Thank you so much, guys. You can also continue on the social media platforms. Just write on the comment section there as we continue rebooting the African mind, the African software rather. We're trying to help our people understand what happened in history, what is happening now, what is most likely to happen. Then Bishop is just preparing us here to say next week we're challenging the governance, the first thinking pillar. When I check the rule of law, what is it that the governments have for us? Now, with me here, just in short, I look at it this way. When I think of the president and the king, for an example, a king has kingship, let me just say royal, has lost its significance. That's how I grew up. It was like one of those people who are just there and trying to be dictators in the villages.
If you don't appreciate your royalty, then you don't understand colonialism. Because the duty of the British, the Netherlands, and the rest of the European countries, when they came to Africa, their fight was not with common people. Their fight was targeting at destroying the royal houses.
Royal houses, yes.
But while they were destroying royal houses, guess which one remained? Their houses.
Their houses, yeah.
The British monarch still stands.
Still stands.
Why?
That to date.
Because in a monarch, you are able to unite a nation. In a monarch, it is the incubation space of culture and tradition. And a monarch gives stability to a nation. In what way? You cannot be running on the 5-3-year changing of the key issues that run the policy. We can have a small little parliament like in Britain. They have their small little parliament that is on the side running there. But what keeps the British nation together is not the parliament. What keeps the nation together, it is the royalty and the traditions which are kept within royalty. Now, until Africa begins to understand, particularly in the south here, the value of the Embo kingdom, the value of the connection of the Zulus and the Xhosas, while we are fighting in a small little tribal house and everyone wants to be a king and wants to be a chief, the question is, can we unite the South African, for example, the South African royal houses into one functional royal space through which we can begin to dictate what we want the government to do? Because the kings have access to the land. The land is not attached to the government. Even when your government presidents go into Europe and argue with the queen about changing issues, the queen looks at them. Guess what she asked them? I never signed a treaty with you. When I was looking for land, I have a treaty here that was signed by King Langalibale. Treaty that was signed by King Shaka. So you are coming in as a politician. Can you bring that guy to come and discuss this issue here? And when our presidents avoid the royal involvement in terms of politics and governance, we are not going to change this country.
So you still attain that, Bishop, the royal houses, they should be involved in the running or in the governing of the countries.
They are the rightful people to actually face up the Europeans and discuss those contracts and discuss those constitutions and discuss those treaties because they were signed by their forefathers. They were signed by those royal houses. And if the Queen of Britain has right over the treaties that her forefathers signed with other kings, why are our kings also not going back there and agree? For example, KwaZulu-Natal was named by who? After who? Which treaty was signed? And if the king of KwaZulu-Natal can walk up and say, okay, this treaty is no longer valid, we are rewriting a new one or we are destroying it, you find that the conversation is at a first-person basis because your father and my father signed this treaty. We can change it. But Ramaphosa, Zuma, and everybody else don't have access to that information. And knowledge is important. African population must know that the slavery of Africa and the colonization of Africa is found in the houses of royalty. You cannot avoid royal houses. They need to be brought to the fore, bring them to the fore so that the conversation can have a royal flair. The land you are fighting over is not in the government. The minerals you are fighting over is not in the government. The people you are fighting over are not in the government.
Yeah, but I think that there will be a lot of some sort of insight that we need to get there, because if you look at the current situation, you have the government, of course, having a say on the land, complaining that some of the royal houses, they have a land which is too much. They should be distributing it amongst their people, of course, in those situations. That
the government does not have land. Let's say it clearly. The government does not have land. All land belongs to tribal leaders. If the government has land, it means that they inherited it from the colonizers who had colonized it. For example, Pretoria. That land belongs to Tswane. And Tswane signed whatever he signed with the Afrikaners and the Europeans who gave him Pretoria. The government inherited a colonial system. Now Pretoria is supposed to belong to the government. But by right, the land does not belong to the government. It belongs to a tribal king.
Well, that is quite interesting, but then that's just for next week. It's just a highlight of what
so don't get me worked up now.
Next week. No, I'm just like I said, we're just trying to get the picture of what is coming up next week.
Yeah, it's going to be fireworks.
What we're going to be looking for.
We might have to look for a lawyer in the course of the week and see who we can bring here.
We should.
I think also, if it is okay, we can actually open up lines and maybe call in one or two legal people. I would love to engage Dr. Mukhweng from South African platform and any other constitutional lawyers and traditional houses. Maybe do a small little profile and let's see whom we can bring on the show for next week.
Yeah, well, it's going to be quite interesting there. But Bishop, once again, thank you so much for your time, for being with us here. It's been quite an interesting moment. Hopefully then, not hopefully, rather. There we go.
For the week, everyone must make for themselves a thinking tool.
Bishop, it's a goodbye from you and from me. Well, thank you so much for tuning in and watching us here on Galaxy TV. This is Sankofa, the show that seeks to bring you more on what happened in history and giving you an analysis of what is currently happening at the moment, but then also giving you some sort of views as to what might the future look like. This is how we wrap it up here for today. But then next week, Sunday, once again, we are back on your faces right there on your screen. You can also join us. The conversation continues on our social media platforms. There you got it on Galaxy News, on Instagram, Facebook. We got it on Twitter. You can also join and continue the conversation. As next week, we're looking at the governance. We're starting with our 7 thinking pillars, as the Bishop will be also with us, and also, of course, will be joined by more legal representatives. We'll be just looking at those things as to how much role are they playing, what happened in history, what is happening now, and what is likely to happen. As from me, Petros, Msweli, and Bishop Maponga, that's how we wrap it up from here. It is a goodbye. But it can see ngomfu.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. This means that most of the existing lockdown measures will remain in force.
It's a combination of law enforcement agency. Our call is very clear. People must stay home. They must not be traveling unnecessarily.
This might last longer.
As you have heard it, we are still right here.
Reporting for Galaxy TV News.
Galaxy News.
Stay tuned with us.
The coronavirus outbreak.
Experience the extraordinary.
Tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. Mexico is, in fact, you will soon find out.
It is a day to celebrate.
We don't approve at all what's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily unusual.
Challenge your ordinary.
Not only the government, the municipality here has had no plan.
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
From rural to urban, we bring you local and international sport.
From Cape to Cairo, from Nairobi to Kinshasa.
As we stand out amongst the rest.
And we are here to inspire you.
From the Horn of Africa to the Equator's indigenous people.
Galaxy Universal Network. Khilikisa ditaba tse felletseng.
Abapenyi bezindaba nezintatheli ezingesabilutho.
Bila woga, upendeleo, hatuogopi chochote.
Channel 500 on StarSat. This is Galaxy Universal Network.
Experience the extraordinary.
Feeling is there that, you're doing something special.
Have you lost it? Move!
Stop being so dramatic, Mira.
Challenge your ordinary.
Why don't you start a dance class?
Experience the extraordinary with StarSat.
Good morning and a warm welcome to Galaxy News. My name is Siboniso, and this is Pan-African Morning. Of course, I'm not going alone. I'm going with my co-host, the one and only, the Pan-African woman, How are you, my darling?
I'm wonderful, Mpumalanga. Yes, welcome to the Pan-African Morning right here on Galaxy Universal Network.
Galaxy Universal Network is a company owned by 5 directors. As I have said, the CEO is led by our able woman, and we are black-owned company. And as such, part of our mission, vision, sacrifice, and choices is to conquer the African continent. By that I mean from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Algeria, Kenya, Tanzania. From Cape to Cairo, my sister. However, part of our plan and our mission is to provoke